You might know you in Japanese is anata, but don't use it if you want to make friends in Japan because it sounds rude, cold, and sets distance. こんにちは、日本語できたのさやかです。Now you might be wondering, so how do Japanese people speak to each other without using you? Well, most times Japanese people use their names to talk to each other or social title or family roles instead of saying you, anata, or any other terms. Well, I did say not to use anata. However, anata and other terms like omae, kimi, anta, they are actually used in real life by native Japanese speakers, but for particular situations. And those situations depend on three elements: the relationship, context, more like your feeling, and the formality. So let's just first dive into how those terms you, anata, and omae are used in real life. Okay, so first one is of course anata. Anata. And this used to be used as a formal term to address someone, but as the language and culture evolved, the formality has decreased. However, I would still say this is a formal term, but depending on how you use it and what situation you use it, it can sound condescending, cold, rude, aggressive, and can set distance because it's too formal. And let me give you some examples when it's actually used. First one is when you have conflict with someone because it sounds rude or aggressive. Also, it's used by older people to younger people, especially when they give advice or evaluation. Like for example, professor to their students, especially in a big class, they would go, あなたはどう思いますか? あなたは you どう思いますか? What do you think? Especially when the professor doesn't know the student's name, they might say あなた. Also, when mothers are mad at children, they might go, あなたいい加減にしなさいよ。ゲームは1時間って言ったでしょ。あなた you いい加減にしなさいよ。That's enough. ゲームは game 1時間って 1 hour 言ったでしょ。I told you. I told you you can play game up to 1 hour. So by using anata, it can put some tension in the room. Another way it's used is by friends, by close friends. It's used ironically. For example, this is what I actually got from my friends. あなた本当によく怪我するね。あなた you 本当に really よく often 怪我するね。You get injured. By saying anata to close friends, it's like you're stepping back and looking down, not looking down, but looking at the person like, あなた本当によく怪我するね。You also might have heard anata in songs, survey, or textbooks, right? For example, the textbook would say, あなたの好きな食べ物は何ですか? あなたの your 好きな favorite 食べ物は food 何ですか? What is it? And the reason why they use anata is because it's anonymous, right? And there's no tone like rude or aggressive or any other things that I said earlier, like how it sounds. Other way that anata is used is wives call their husbands anata, especially if they are around over 50s. Nowadays, none of my friends call their husbands anata, so it's a generation thing. It's also used to quote third-person speech, especially when you're talking about something a little negative. For example, 結婚まだいつ結婚するのって言われるの嫌じゃない？わかる。あなたの考え方押し付けないでって思う。So here, she said, あなたの考え方 your opinion 押し付けないで don't push it on me って思う。I think. So that was a quote. So when she said あなたの that あなた is not towards her, right? It's towards the third person, but the third person is not there. Moving on to the next term. Next term is anta. Anta. And anta is actually a casual version of anata. So the formality is casual, and it can sound exactly the same thing, like rude, condescending, aggressive, etc. It can also sound like you're from the country, but I've heard YouTubers who are from Tokyo use anta as well. For example, when it's used within family, again, it's from parents to their children, especially mothers to their children, saying, for example, あんたいつまでも寝てないで早く起きなさい。 あんたいつまでも寝てないで早く起きなさい。If it's used by close friends, it's in a silly way. あんた今日なんか可愛いじゃん。あんた you 今日 today 可愛いじゃん。You look kind of cute. So it's like a silly way. It's also used by older people to younger people. Like for example, this is what my grandma actually said to me. あんたはご飯食べに行かんの？あんたは you ご飯食べに go to eat 行かんの not going. And also men use it with family and also outside the family as well, but only to people who are in the same age or younger. あんたのうちのお母さんは元気か？あんたのうちのあんた your house お母さんは mother 元気か？ Is she good? How is she doing? But again, how it sounds varies depending on the region and also their age. So you might not want to use it, but want to catch it when they use it. Next one is omae. Omae, and you've probably heard this in anime or J-dramas or maybe songs. But did you know omae was originally a respectful way to address God or Buddha or nobleman in the past. But then again, the language and culture evolved and it is no longer a respectful way at all. So the formality for omae is casual, very, very casual. And how it sounds is rude and aggressive. But omae is actually used, and I have to admit that I have used omae. As it sounds aggressive, it sounds more masculine, right? So it's mostly used by men. Especially among close friends, they would use omae. Like for example, お前これ食う？お前すげえな or something like that. So お前これ食う is like a really casual way and masculine way of saying, do you want to eat this? 食う is like a masculine way of saying 食べる？お前これ食う？ or お前すげえな。すげえ is again a masculine way of saying すごいね. But he would say お前すげえな. And also may use it to their family members, like especially their children or maybe siblings. Like for example, on the phone, the dad would call their children and say, お前次いつ帰ってくるんだ？お前次いつ帰ってくるんだ？ When are you coming back next time? And again, it sounds aggressive and rude, so it's used when you have a conflict with someone. Like for example, お前ふざけんなよ。I did say it's used mostly by men, but women also use it. But you might get watch your language if you use omae. Alright, next one is kimi. Kimi. And you might recall this kimi from the movie title Kimi no Na wa. Again, those terms like anata, kimi, those are often used in songs or movies because it's anonymous and it sounds like a novel. Coming back to kimi, depending on how it's used, kimi can sound condescending or sometimes bossy or distant. But it's not always a bad thing. Like for example, male boss is talking to the youngers and then complimenting. For example, looking at the documents that the youngers made and then he would go, 君の資料わかりやすいね。君の your 資料 document or the presentation わかりやすいね。It's easy to understand. So I don't think the youngers who get that would take it any offensive way. It's often used by men, especially older people to younger people. And you also might have heard Temee, Kisama, Boku, Jibun. Well, let's first talk about these two. So Jibun and Boku are actually first-person pronouns that I covered in this video, so go check it out for more information. But Jibun is a first-person pronoun used mostly by athletic people, and Boku is used by boys and men. However, Jibun is used as a second-person pronoun in Kansai region, like Osaka area, and also Boku is used as a second-person pronoun when you talk to a young boy. For example, you don't know their name, but he looks like he's lost. You can say, あ、僕どうしたの？あ、僕大丈夫？迷子？ And let's talk about Kisama and Temee. Those are the terms that you might have heard in anime. If you have, you probably know when they are used. Yes, they're used in a fight or when they have conflict or argument. They are really aggressive, so don't use it unless you're in a serious fight. but hopefully not. Now that you've learned common ways of saying you and how they're used and how not to use them, you're probably wondering, so how do Japanese people talk to each other without saying you? People usually talk to each other using their names. Like for example, in a casual conversation, a friend would go, さやかは土日何してるの? Or at a restaurant or cafe looking at the menu, さやかはどれにする? But you don't always have to mention their name if it's clear who you're talking to. But only if it's obvious in the context. Let's say you're with a friend in a room. Only one friend, so you're two of you together. It's obvious who you're talking to, right? Like for example, ね、明日仕事ある? ない。日曜日空いてる? カフェ行かない? いいね. So as you heard, she did not say anata or her name at all to talk because it was obvious who the question was directed to, right? Let's think about this situation. You're in a room with two other people, so three of you together in the room. You want to ask a question, one of them at a time. Then you want to say their name. Let's say that I'm talking to Mika and Yuri. Mika, 明日仕事ある? Yuri は? Mika, これ飲む? Yuri も飲む? And if I want to talk to them at the same time, you don't have to mention their names if you are looking at them. Like for example, ね、日曜日空いてる? カフェ行かない? Something like that. We also use san, chan, kun, and those honorific titles to show respect towards them. For example, ミカさんのジャケット綺麗ですね。どこで買ったんですか? ミカさんの Mika'sジャケット jacket 綺麗ですね. It's beautiful. どこで買ったんですか? Where did you get it? And the second sentence, どこで買ったんですか? I didn't mention Mika-san or anata because it was already put in the context. Another example, ゆりちゃん、今日保育園で何したの? ゆりちゃん、ゆり, it's little, 今日, today, 保育園で in a nursery school, 何したの? What did you do? But then you might be thinking, what if you don't know their names? How do you talk to them? Well, I think it can be divided into two different situations. One is when you don't have to know their names. For example, you're talking to someone and asking, are you in line? You can just choose not to say anata or anything, but just let them know that you're talking to them by saying, すみません、並んでますか? すみません、並んでますか? Are you in line? So by saying すみません, you're making sure that they know that you're talking to them. So it's important to say すみません, excuse me. But it really depends on the situation. For example, you're hanging out with a friend and you bump into another friend with their friend, right? Then I think in English or maybe in other culture, you'd introduce them to each other, right? So you'd get to know their name. However, this culture is not so common in Japan. I would say most times they just start talking to each other, the people who know each other, and then their friends are just like behind and maybe they might join the conversation. It really depends on the person and also the context and what they're talking about. But if the conversation flourish and you want to know their name, you can ask すみません、お名前なんて言うんですか? すみません, excuse me, お名前 name なんて what 言うんですか? Another way is すみません、名前聞いてもいいですか? すみません、名前 name 聞いてもいいですか? Can I ask? Another situation is when you have forgotten their name. It happens, I know, especially when you're not familiar with the names. Names from different culture is difficult to remember, right? So one way is that you can wait until another person in the room says their name. Or you can just be honest and ask, すみません、お名前もう一度聞いてもいいですか? すみません、I'm sorry, お名前 name もう一度 once more 聞いてもいいですか? Can I ask? Another way is you can go to a different friend who knows their name and ask in the back, ねえねえ、赤い服の人、名前なんだっけ? 赤い服の人、the person in red, 名前 name なんだっけ? What was the name? Formally, you can ask, すみません。赤い服の方、お名前何でしたっけ? 赤い服の方, the person in red, お名前, name, 何でしたっけ? What was it? Or when you're introducing yourself and you aren't confident enough to remember their name, you can add this sentence saying, 名前覚えるのが苦手なので、また聞いちゃったらすみません。名前覚えるのが to memorize names 苦手なので I'm bad at it. また聞いちゃったら if I ask you again すみません I'm sorry. But we don't just use their names to talk to each other. Within the family, if they are older than you, you'd refer to them in their family role. For example, おじいちゃん、おばあちゃん、お父さん、お母さん、お兄ちゃん、お姉ちゃん. It actually depends on the family though. Like for example, I have a younger sister and younger brother. I call them Tomoka and Koki. My sister, Tomoka, calls me お姉ちゃん. And my brother, Koki, calls me Sayane. I clearly remember why Koki started calling me Sayane, not just お姉ちゃん. He calls Tomoka Tomone. The reason why is I vividly remember this moment and I feel sorry for him. Me, Sayaka, and my younger sister Tomoka are two big sisters to him, right? And one day we were not in a good mood. And Koki called one of them お姉ちゃん! And then because we were not in a good mood, we were like どっち?わかるように言って! So he started calling me Sayane, Saya from Sayaka, Ne from お姉ちゃん, and then Tomoka, Tomone, ごめん Koki. But some of my friends who have siblings, they call their older sister with their name or their nickname. So it really depends on the family. And the last one you need to know to address someone in a native way is the social title. For example, sensei. You might know sensei already. Sensei means teacher. Teachers from kindergarten to university, they're all teachers. So sensei, sensei. It would be weird to call my teacher, for example, Mika. Mika is my teacher. It's weird to say Mika-san. That's not it. There's a rule. If they have the social title that you can call by, then you should use the social title. So I should say sensei or Mika sensei, or with Mika's surname, maybe Tanaka Mika. Tanaka sensei. And sensei is not just used for teachers and professors, but also for doctors, lawyers, accountants, and politicians. And another word that you might have heard is senpai. Senpai. Sometimes I get senpai in my DM, but I'm pretty sure that I am not their senpai because senpai is a person who joined the school or the workplace before you. So for instance, if you are in the first grade, someone who's in the second grade is your senpai. Or someone who have graduated from the same school is your senpai. Another one is お客様 or お客さん. This means customer, so it's used by, businesses calling their customers. For example, if you go to a restaurant and then you forget your smartphone on the table, お客様、スマホお忘れですよ. You forgot your smartphone. Now you know how to talk to other people, but I would say it's best to use their names, family roles, or social title when you speak. Well, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and also don't forget to subscribe and you might also like this video. 今日も最後まで見てくれてありがとう. I'll see you in the next video. またね